He called her an asset, replaced her like a chess piece, handed her empire to another woman, and poured champagne on top. But here's what Sunmay never understood about Luna. She didn't build a life with him, she built a trap around him. And tonight, the door just closed. Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome to Afro-Korean Heartbeat Stories, where the women always hold the cards. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is going to have you picking your jaw up off the floor. And drop your city in the comments. I want to know where my people are watching from. Atlanta, Lagos, London, Houston, Toronto. Tell me where you are. Now let's get into it. The night Los Angeles was at its most beautiful was the night Sunmay committed his greatest mistake. From 40 floors above the city, the skyline looked like shattered diamonds, blue and gold light bleeding into the dark, blurring at the edges like a fever dream. Floor-to-ceiling glass wrapped the penthouse in silence, the kind of silence that cost money, the kind that made a man feel invincible. Sunmay stood at the window, one hand cradling a crystal glass of aged cognac, the other resting in his trouser pocket like a man who had already rehearsed this moment and found himself satisfied with how it would go. He was 38 years old and had spent 12 of those years building something that Los Angeles whispered about in rooms where the lights stayed low. The Jade Dragon Syndicate. His name, his blood, or so he believed. He didn't turn when the elevator opened. He knew the scent of her, warm amber and something clean underneath, like rain on warm stone. He had known it for 5 years. He let it fill the room and told himself he felt nothing. There was a time, and he would never have admitted this to anyone, not even himself in the quiet hours before dawn, when Luna walking into a room was the only thing that made the room feel real. When she was 26 and he was 33, and they had sat on the floor of an empty apartment in Silver Lake, eating takeout from paper containers, and she had laughed at something he'd said, and the whole city had felt like a beginning. He had looked at her face in that moment, brown skin catching the low lamplight, her natural hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes bright with something he'd been too young and too arrogant to properly name, and felt something that men like him spent the rest of their lives burying under ambition and acquisition. And he had buried it well. Luna stepped into the penthouse the way she always moved, quietly, intentionally, like every step was a decision, never an accident. She wore a cobalt blue dress that skimmed her shoulders and caught the city light, and her natural hair, full, dark, effortlessly regal, framed a face composed in a way that should have unnerved him. Her dark eyes moved through the room before they found him, reading the space before reading the man. She had always done that. He had once found it comforting. Tonight it unsettled him in a way he would not examine. "Luna," he said. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "You look well." She said nothing. She stood in the center of the room, her hands relaxed at her sides, watching him with an expression he could not fully decode and never fully had been able to, which had always been, though he'd never said it aloud, one of the things that had drawn him to her. She was the only person in his world whose next move he could never entirely predict. "Sit down," he said. "I'll stand," she replied. Simple, no edge, just a statement of fact. "I'll be direct," he said, setting his glass on the onyx side table with a precise click. "You have been an extraordinary partner, strategic, patient, loyal in your way." He paused. "But I'm moving into a different space now, global, high society. The rooms I need to walk into, they require a specific kind of presence beside me." Something moved behind Luna's eyes, barely perceptible, there and gone. "Seraphina Vasile," he continued, "is the daughter of Florin Vasile, European, connected, polished in the way that opens doors in Geneva, in Monaco. Eat in boardrooms where the real decisions are made." He straightened his jacket. "She is what this next chapter requires." He told himself he felt nothing, but somewhere beneath the tailored suit and the rehearsed composure and 12 years of armor, something registered the way she absorbed his words, not with the devastation he had half expected and perhaps on some unexamined level half prepared himself to manage, but with a stillness so complete it felt almost like she had known this was coming long before he had decided it. He thought, for one unguarded second, that she was the only person he had ever met who made him feel like the less intelligent person in the room. Then he sealed that thought away where it belonged. "You've been a loyal asset, Luna," he said, his tone softening just enough to sound almost kind. But a king needs a queen who opens doors in high society. Seraphina is perfection. He exhaled. You're just a memory of where I started. Luna reached up and adjusted her earring. A slow, deliberate motion. Her fingers were completely steady. You think you've reached the top, Sunmay, she said. Her voice was low, unhurried, each word placed with the care of someone who has no need to rush because the outcome is already settled. But you've forgotten who built the ladder. He blinked. She picked up her clutch from the side table near the door where she had set it when she walked in. She hadn't even sat down. She hadn't come here to stay. Luna, good night, Sunmay. And she walked to the elevator, back straight, chin level, the cobalt blue of her dress catching the last of the penthouse light as the doors opened. She stepped in. The doors closed. The penthouse was silent again. Sunmay stood at his window, picked up his cognac, looked out at the city he believed, with every fiber of his arrogance, was his. 40 floors below, in the elevator, Luna exhaled, one long, slow breath. A single tear moved down her cheekbone and she let it fall. Just the one. She watched it drop, and then she reached into her clutch and withdrew her phone. Black, encrypted, a model that didn't exist in any retail store. She opened an application, no icon, no label, just a blank screen that responded only to her thumbprint, and typed 4 words. Phase 1. Begin liquidating. She pressed send. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. Luna walked to her car, matte black and unremarkable, and sat behind the wheel. The city hummed around her. The night was alive with the sound of a million lives being lived in complete ignorance of what had just been set in motion. She pulled out into the Los Angeles dark. Sunmay had just made the most expensive decision of his life. He just didn't know it yet. Now, before we go any further, drop your city in the comments right now. Where are you watching from? And tell me, do you already see where this is going? Because I promise you, you do not see all of it. Not yet. Stay with me. Seraphina Vasile arrived in Sunmay's life the way expensive things arrive, announced, curated, and wrapped in the suggestion that her presence elevated everything around her. She was tall, pale-complexioned, with dark auburn hair that she wore in a low chignon, and she moved through Sunmay's world with the measured confidence of a woman who had been told from birth that rooms rearranged themselves for her convenience. And for a while, Sunmay believed she was exactly what she appeared to be. She was demanding in the way he'd expected, the jewelry, the restaurant reservations, the preference for first-class everything and nothing less. He found he didn't mind it. She was a performance he could evaluate. Seraphina's wants were legible. She asked for things directly and received them and seemed satisfied. He understood that transaction. He'd always understood transactions. What unsettled him, when he allowed himself to notice, was an occasional quality to her attention, a sharpness beneath the softness, a moment between one expression and the next where something else lived, a precision that felt less like intelligence and more like surveillance. He noticed it twice in the first month and filed it away under the category of things that wealthy, complicated women carried, history, damage, agenda, and decided it was not his concern. Seraphina was the image. That was her function. But there were moments, and he would not have confessed them to anyone, when she said something particularly intelligent about one of his operations, and he felt the specific absence of someone else, someone who would have followed that observation 3 moves deeper and mapped the consequences before he'd finished processing the premise. Someone whose voice had been warm amber and rain on warm stone. He did not say the name, even inside his own mind. He simply noted the absence and moved on. He was Sunmay. He did not look back. For 3 months after the penthouse, 3 months into his curated performance of a man ascending, Sunmay sat at the head of a conference table in a private room above the Nighthawk Hotel. 12 men around him, buyers from Seoul, Frankfurt, and Dubai. Men whose handshakes meant more than most nations' treaties. The meeting had been 18 months in the making. Tonight was the closing. He reached into his jacket and withdrew his black card, the one tied to the Zurich account, the one with no stated limit. He slid it across the table. The machine blinked, declined. A ripple of silence, too brief for the buyers to fully register, but Sunmay felt it like a stone through glass. He smiled, Produced a second card. Declined. His jaw tightened. He kept the smile. Technical delay, he said smoothly. My people will wire directly before close of business tomorrow. The meeting ended. The buyers left. Sunmei was on the phone to his Zurich contact before the elevator doors closed. The answer came in the form of a pause, the kind of pause a professional uses when delivering information they are not sure the recipient is prepared for. Mr. Sun, the account access was modified 61 days ago. The primary signatory authorization is no longer registered to your biometric credentials. Sunmei's blood went cold. The signature is digital, sir, but the biometric profile it was reauthorized under, our system flags it as a match to a profile last used by Adaeze Okafor. The name landed in his chest like something solid. Luna. He stood in the empty conference room and looked out at the city. The lights that had always felt like proof of his dominance now looked cold, distant, like they were watching him. He didn't sleep that night. He lay beside Seraphina and watched the ceiling and turned the name over in his mind and would not let himself follow where it led. At 2:17 a.m., Seraphina moved. He kept his breathing even, watched through his lashes as she slid from the bed with the careful precision of someone trained never to wake the person beside her. She moved to the walk-in wardrobe. The door closed, not completely. A sliver of light, then a voice, low, clipped. He rose, silent, moved to the door, through the sliver. Seraphina, back to him, a satellite phone pressed to her ear, a device he had never seen in this suite. Her posture entirely different from the languid, decorative woman she was in daylight. Her spine was straight, her voice was controlled, professional. Asset is isolated, she said. Financial sequencing is at 60%. Timeline holds. A pause. She listened. Understood. Alpha primary. Proceeding. She ended the call. Sunmei was back in the bed by the time she emerged, eyes closed, breathing even. But behind his eyelids, his mind was moving at speed. Alpha primary. He knew every player in every syndicate on the western seaboard. He had never, in 5 years of building his empire, heard anyone use that designation. He reached under his pillow. His secondary phone, the encrypted one, the one he kept always within reach, was gone. The federal marshals arrived at the Hollywood Hills Fortress on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. 2 marshals and a real estate attorney. Sunmei answered the door in a state of genuine confusion, the first genuine emotion he had displayed in weeks. The attorney handed him a document. He read it twice, then a third time. The property had never been deeded in his name. It had been leased to him by a holding company called Nightshade Pacific Holdings, LLC. The lease, signed 12 years ago and renewed silently every 3 years without his knowledge, had been formally terminated. He had 7 days left. There's a mistake, he said. The attorney gave him the look that attorneys give people who say that. Mr. Sun, the title has been held by Nightshade Pacific since original construction. The primary beneficiary of that entity has formally reclaimed the asset. He stood on the driveway of a house that was not his and watched the morning light fall across the hills. Seraphina appeared in the doorway in her robe, coffee in hand. Her concern looked, he noticed it now with a clarity that felt new and cold, like a performance, like watching an actor who had learned empathy from a textbook. What's wrong? She asked. He looked at her. The satellite phone, Alpha Primary, the account, the deed. Nothing, he said, but his hands, tucked into his trouser pockets, were completely still. The stillness of a man who has just understood that every wall he built himself a fortress inside belonged to someone else. What came next, and this is where it is important to pay attention, because this is where Sunmei's world did not just crack. It shattered, began with a dinner. Seraphina had chosen the restaurant. She had been doing that more often lately. Small navigations, subtle redirections, that's the kind that a man notices only in retrospect. She wore something ivory and understated that evening, and she sat across from him with a quietness that felt different from her usual composed distance. Softer. Almost. And he registered this because it was unusual enough to register, almost uncertain. She reached across the white tablecloth and placed his hand between both of hers. Sunmei, she said. Her voice had something in it he had not heard before, something that sounded, despite everything that would come later, like genuine feeling. I need to tell you something." Her eyes met his, and for a moment, just one moment, the architecture of her performance fell away. What he saw underneath was not the cold professional, not the corporate spy, not the decorative acquisition. What he saw was a woman carrying something heavy, and the weight of it looked real. "I'm pregnant," she said. He looked at her hands covering his, her expression holding something that trembled at the edge of hope and fear simultaneously, and he felt something crack open in his chest, not joy, something more complicated and more painful than joy, something that smelled like hope and felt like the last door in a burning building, an air, something that was his, undeniably, irrevocably his, in a world where everything else had turned out to belong to someone else. He almost let himself believe it. Almost. He went home that night and pulled her medical records through a contact at Cedars-Sinai. 4 minutes of reading. Then he sat very still. He opened a second file, his own medical history, the vitamins Luna had formulated specifically for his stress levels. The small amber bottle, her handwriting on the label. He had taken them every morning for 4 years without a second thought. The report was clinical in its language, a compound administered over a sustained period that had rendered him unable to father children. Irreversible. Seraphina's pregnancy was impossible. He closed the laptop. The hope, that brief, painful, real thing he had felt when she held his hand, collapsed into something far colder. Luna had not just taken his empire, she had ensured 4 years before tonight that he could never rebuild it through legacy, through blood, through a child who might carry his name forward. She had thought of everything. And now, before we get to what happens next, because what comes next is going to break something open, I need you to stay with me. Team Luna. Are you still standing with her after everything she did? Or is it getting complicated? Drop it in the comments right now. And if you're just finding this channel, subscribe. Because this story is not finished, and what's coming in the next few minutes is the part people are going to be talking about. He called an emergency meeting, a warehouse in Inglewood, 8 men, his inner circle. He arrived last, always arrived last, old power move. But tonight, when he walked in, no one stood. 8 men sat around a metal table and watched him enter, and not one of them moved. He stopped, read the room. The air had a different quality, not the focused tension of men preparing for a crisis, something relaxed, almost resigned, like men who had been waiting a long time for a conversation they had rehearsed. Jawan, he said to his right hand, the man who had been beside him for 11 years, I need you to trace the source of the Nightshade account freezes. I know the source, Jawan said. He said it simply. The way you state a fact you have known for a long time. Then tell me. Jawan looked at the table for a moment, then up. His voice carried no cruelty, only the exhaustion of a man delivering something long overdue. We've been receiving supplemental compensation from Nightshade Pacific for 6 years. All of us. He gestured around the table. Our families are cared for through a separate trust she set up, our children's education, our parents' health costs, all managed. Luna told us to follow you, Jawan continued. She said you were the shield, the noise, the face that people watched while the real work happened. A pause. We followed you, Sunmei, but we were always hers. Sunmei stood at the head of a table where no one looked at him with deference anymore, and somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath the disbelief, beneath the rage that was building like pressure behind glass, a voice that sounded uncomfortably like self-knowledge said, you knew she was the smartest person in every room. You just never thought she was smarter than you. He left the warehouse, drove in silence, let the city pass outside the window like something happening to someone else. And then he went back to the fortress, 7 days left on its use, and walked to the study and opened the safe behind the east bookcase. The files inside were meticulous, were organized in a manner he recognized immediately as hers, color-coded, dated, cross-referenced. He pulled the first folder, Jade Dragon Syndicate, Foundational Charter, Original Signatories, 1987. He read the first page and felt the room tilt. The Jade Dragon Syndicate had been incorporated under a partnership agreement between 2 founding families. His father's name appeared second. The first name, the originating partner, the hereditary chair, was Adaeze Okafor, Luna's grandfather. He turned the pages. The succession clause was unambiguous. Hereditary chairmanship passed through the Okafor line. Every operation, every expansion, every alliance of the last 3 decades had technically required the Okafor heir's authorization. His father had been a front, a visible, intimidating face for an empire whose roots were not his. And Luna was the sole hereditary heir. She hadn't been his partner, she had been his employer, and she had never once in 5 years needed to tell him. He drove himself east at 4 a.m. No driver, no security. He took a car registered under a name he'd used once years ago and drove until Los Angeles fell behind him and the desert opened ahead. Wide, dark, silent. The vault was 2 hours from the city, a location known to no one. He had built it himself, contracted under 3 layers of shell companies, overseen the construction personally. He had told no one, not J1, not his financial team, not Luna. This was the one thing he had done entirely alone. He was sure of it. The door opened, climate-controlled, silent. The shelves lined the walls with the same meticulous precision as Luna's file. They were completely empty. Every gold bar, every stacked currency, every physical insurance policy gone. The shelves were clean in a way that felt deliberate, not ransacked, curated. The way you leave a room when you're done with it. On the center shelf, propped against the bare wall, was a single photograph. A Polaroid. Him and Luna. 10 years ago, before everything, standing at a street food stall in Koreatown, laughing at something off camera. Luna was wearing a yellow dress, her hair loose, and she was looking at him the way people look at someone they genuinely love. Unguarded, bright, completely unperformed. He looked younger, lighter, unaware of the life he was about to construct around himself and mistake for a kingdom. On the white border of the Polaroid, in Luna's handwriting, were 7 words. I gave you everything, and now I take it back. Sunmei sat down on the floor of the empty vault and held the photograph and stayed there in the silence for a very long time. He came back to the penthouse at dawn, not to reclaim it. He came because he had nowhere else to go. He took the elevator up, used his key card, still worked, everything still functioned on the surface, and opened the door. The first thing he heard was laughter. Low, warm, genuinely unguarded, a sound he recognized from a Polaroid taken 10 years ago at a street food stall in Koreatown. He stepped inside. At the white marble table sat 2 women. A bottle of champagne, his champagne, the vintage he'd bought to celebrate what he'd thought was his peak, opened between them. 2 glasses, both used, Seraphina and Luna. Luna wore midnight black. To no jewelry except the hoop earring she had adjusted on her way out of his life 3 months ago. Her natural hair was gathered loosely at the crown, and she sat with the complete ease of a woman inside her own authority. Which, Sunmei now understood with the full weight of everything he knew, was precisely what it was. She looked up when he walked in. She didn't look surprised. Sunmei, she said. His name in her mouth, in that room, felt different from every time before. Not softer, cleaner, accurate. The way you say the name of something you have fully understood. He looked at Seraphina. The satellite phone. Alpha primary. The pregnancy. 3 months of performance executed with a precision that had almost reached him. Who are you? He asked. Seraphina set her glass down. The softness fell away like a coat sliding off shoulders. What remained was precise, controlled, and familiar. The same quality of stillness, the same intelligence. He recognized it because he had spent 5 years beside a woman who moved exactly that way. My name is Adaeze Okafor, she said. Luna's my older sister. I was placed beside you 16 weeks ago to give you something to focus on while the transition completed. He turned to Luna. She volunteered, Luna said simply. She turned her glass slowly on the table. Seraphina has been watching you mismanage our grandfather's legacy for years. She needed no convincing. Sunmei stood at the entrance of a room that was not his, in a city that had never been his, looking at the 2 women who had, between them, Bash without a raised voice or a visible weapon or a single moment of visible aggression, taken back everything. Luna reached for her champagne. "Sit down, Sunmay," she said. "Or don't. It doesn't matter now." He didn't sit. He went to the roof. Some part of him, still running on the old wiring, needed the air, the elevation, the sensation of standing above the city that had witnessed his rise. His private helipad was up there. The helicopter was up there. The door opened. The Los Angeles night met him full in the face, warm, indifferent, magnificent. He crossed to the helicopter in 4 strides and reached for the door and stopped. The rotors were stationary. The instrument panel was dark. He checked his phone. No signal. Behind him, the roof access door opened. Luna stepped out. Nor she walked to the center of the rooftop the way she walked everywhere, unhurried, each step exact, and stopped in the space between the elevator and the helipad. The city light caught the silk of her dress and the hoop at her ear and the composure in her face. And Sunmay looked at her and felt something that was not quite anger and not quite grief and not entirely anything he had a clean word for. "Where is my money, Luna?" His voice came out louder than he intended. It cracked at the edges, the first honest sound he had made in months. "It was never yours, Sunmay," she said. She stepped forward into the fuller light, and he saw her face clearly. No performance, just the truth. The version of her face he had last seen in a Polaroid, unguarded and exact except older now, carrying the weight of what she had built and protected and reclaimed. "I am the Nightshade Group," she said. "Every shipment, every contract, every alliance that kept federal attention directed elsewhere. I built it. I managed it. I sustained it. You were the name on the front of the building." A pause, just long enough. The loud, arresting, arrogant name I needed people to look at while I built the real structure behind it. "Luna, you sat across from me in our penthouse," she said, and her voice shifted, not softer, but more direct, more precise, the way a surgeon becomes more exact at the moment of incision. "And told me I was a memory of where you started. You told me Seraphina was perfection." She let the word live in the night air between them. "I built the ladder, Sunmay. I built the penthouse it led to. I built every rung of everything you climbed." He moved toward her. His bodyguards, 2 men who had eaten at his table, who had stood at his shoulder for 7 years, stepped from the shadows at the rooftop edge and positioned themselves between him and Luna. They didn't raise weapons. The positioning was sufficient. Sunmay stopped. Luna watched this happen with an expression that was perhaps the most devastating thing in the room, not triumph, something more complicated, something that had required enormous discipline to arrive at, something that looked, if you were paying close enough attention, like the final stage of grief. "You dumped me," she said quietly, "because I wasn't perfect enough for your image." The word perfect, the way her voice shaped it, dry and exact, or the way you say a word you have examined from every angle and found hollow, landed in the center of his chest. "I didn't lose a boyfriend, Sunmay." She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. "I fired an employee." She didn't take his life. Death, for a man like Sunmay, would have been its own mythology, a story people told about a fallen king. Luna had no interest in his mythology. She left him standing on the rooftop with a stationary helicopter and the knowledge that there was nothing in Los Angeles, no account, no building, no alliance, no legacy, that bore his name and meant anything. By 6 a.m., she was in the back of a blacked-out SUV, moving through the silver gray of early morning Los Angeles. The streets were almost empty. She had always loved this hour. The city before it remembered to perform. But she picked up her phone and dialed. "The transition is complete," she said. Her voice was even, unadorned. "The Jade Dragon is dissolved. Long live the Nightshade." At a stoplight, Luna looked out the window. Sunmay stood on the corner of 6th and Flower, the corner where they had first met 10 years ago beside a food truck that no longer existed. He stood in the suit he'd slept in. No phone, no wallet, no car. The last evidence of a man who had confused the costume for the person wearing it. He saw the SUV. He saw her. Luna looked at him through the dark glass. She let herself look. Not to watch him diminish. She had no appetite for that. She looked because she had loved him once, genuinely, in the way you love the version of someone you believe they are capable of becoming. She had looked at Sunmay and seen something that turned out to be a projection, a canvas she had mistaken for a person. She let the grief of that, small, precise, and long overdue, move through her. The light changed. The SUV moved forward. In the rearview mirror, the figure on the corner grew smaller, then smaller still. Then the street turned, and he was gone. Luna opened her tablet, a new file, a blank page. She typed, "Liquidate all remaining assets associated with Sun Mei. Archive. Begin Phase 2. She pressed send. Outside, Los Angeles came alive in the gold of morning. The buildings caught the light and gave it back, indifferent, magnificent, exactly as it had always been. The city didn't care who owned it. Luna did. And that is what happens when a man confuses access for ownership. Sun Mei had the keys, but Luna built the house. He had the title, but she held the deed. He thought he was the king of Los Angeles. He was just the name she chose to put on the door. Now, I need to hear from you. Was Luna's move cold, calculated, and completely deserved? Or did Sun Mei get more than he bargained for? Drop it in the comments. Team Luna or Team Sun Mei? Let's have that conversation right now. And tell me your city. Lagos, Atlanta, London, Houston, Toronto, Birmingham, Accra, New York. Where are you watching from? I read every single comment. If this story had you from the first word, and you know it did, hit that subscribe button because the Nightshade empire is not finished. Luna's new rival is already moving, someone who knew the Jade Dragon from the very beginning. Someone who believes the Nightshade belongs to them. And the next story? Makes this one look like a warm-up. Part 2 is coming, and Luna is not the same woman who walked out of that penthouse. Subscribe so you don't miss it. We'll see you there.